Hey everybody, we're gonna get started in just about a minute here. I like to start right at 11. So hang tight. Thanks for getting here early. Alrighty, everyone. Well, hey, we are hitting 11 on the dot, so I want to make sure to be respectful of everybody's time. So why don't we jump into this? Hopefully everybody's having a wonderful summer. I know it's starting to wind down here as we're headed into September, believe it or not. You can really feel it at nighttime. It's getting that crisp autumn feeling in the air, which we all wish autumn was longer, right? But there's probably a good month or two of that, and then hey, it's winter. So anyway, thank you all so much for setting aside some time in your day, whether you're here in person or you are just catching the recording. I know I already talked to a lot of folks that wanted the recording. So today we are going to be talking all about building a budget, the various things that you and your family, your household should be thinking about, whether you have a budget established or you're starting from ground zero. There's going to be some helpful tidbits in here that wherever you are in your financial journey, you should be able to kind of take some of these ideas and concepts and apply them to your own situation. So before I jump into kind of the meat and potatoes here, let me tell you a little bit about who I am, why I'm qualified to give this talk, and what I do as a resource for members of our preferred partners here, whether you're with Advocate Aurora, Children's Hospital, Optum Health. We do these webinars consistently for a lot of you guys. So my name is Lucas Amel. I'm a fully licensed fiduciary financial planner based out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I come from a background, of course, of personal finance. I went to Carroll University here in Waukesha, graduated with honors in finance, went on to kind of start my own company right at the bright, starry-eyed age of 22. And, now I've been working at it for about 8 years. So collectively, I've got a significant background in training and practice in investment management, retirement planning, budgeting, estate planning, tax preparation and planning. So kind of a little bit on everything under the sun here. But ultimately, the reason why our team puts these together and kind of my why and what gets me out of bed in the morning is being able to educate people about these very foreign financial concepts. Unfortunately, when you're growing up, you're going to school. Sorry, I got a notification. You're growing up, you're going to school, they're not really teaching you about, how to build a budget, how to do your taxes, how should your investments be positioned. So I kind of identified this collective confusion regarding personal finance. And, I feel that it's my duty by the man upstairs telling me like, hey, you have a talent at this, you can make these complicated concepts understandable to people. So go out and educate and help as many people as you can. So organizationally wise, I am a managing partner of the Lettenberger Financial Group. we're collectively overseeing about $250 million. So working with people all over the country, all walks of life, whether it's somebody in their 20s, just graduated from school, getting started in their career, to people who are, retiring, to people who are, towards the end of their life cycle here and kind of planning to transition money to charities and heirs. So I already talked about areas of focus, but enough about me and who I'm not, right? I am not an attorney, nor am I a licensed CPA. So everything that we're going to be covering today, just know that it is meant to be informational. This is not tailor-made specific financial advice for you and your family's situation. I'm just going to be communicating broad concepts today. So hopefully you can find a couple things that, make this worth your time. So going on to everything, what is financial well-being? So now we're here towards the end of August already. We've been doing these workshops every single month throughout the course of the year. And realistically, we did them every month last year as well. But everything, you guys, has been surrounded on this concept of financial well-being. So what is it? We kind of break it down into 4 main pillars. And the first pillar is actually what we're going to be honing in and focusing on today the most, is having control over your day-to-day or your month-to-month finances, right? So one of the things that I make sure to discern every time I'm meeting with a new family is, what is the cash flow situation like? Because realistically, your budgeting and the flow of your money today is going to be the basis for all financial planning decisions that you're going to need to make in your lifetime. So having a solid understanding and handle on and control of what's coming in and where's it going is hugely important. It's one of the cornerstones. The second one, and we're also going to talk about this, the second cornerstone of financial well-being is having the capacity to absorb some degree of financial shock. So what that means in layman's terms is honestly having an emergency fund, or at least having some degree of a contingency plan for when things go wrong. And, that can be an unexpected medical event. It could be an unexpected car or house repair. It could be, hey, all of a sudden one of your kids wants to sign up for cheerleading and it costs $1,000 a month. Having the capacity to make these incremental, flexible adjustments to your spending and where the cash is flowing is hugely important. And truthfully, the framework of all of that is our topic for today, because it's having a budget. Next, being on track to meet your financial goals. One of the biggest things, I make this joke all the time, is one of the best ways to be on track to meet your financial goals is first and foremost having financial goals. Whether that means, hey, I want to be saving this much a month, or I want to retire at this age with this kind of cash flow, or hey, I want to help my kids go to school, but I don't want to jeopardize my own retirement. How do all those things bake together? And ultimately, you really can get the answer to all of those things by having a laid out and followed budget, right? And then the last cornerstone here, having the financial freedom that are going to allow you to make the choices that you want to make to live the life that you want to live. By having an established budget, by having an established financial plan, you're able to do more things and spend and use your money more freely, because you'll have the confidence knowing, hey, I can afford this $10,000 cruise for me and my partner to and from Alaska, because I know I'm saving this much. I have my emergency fund established. I'm on track to meet my goals. So realistically, all of these 4 pillars really tie together, and they're ultimately held together by our topic for today, which is budgeting. So as we're kind of diving into things here and looking at an agenda of some of the various topics that we're going to cover in relation to budgeting today, They're as follows, and as you can see on the screen, first of all, we're going to need to look at, okay, well, what does your income look like? Really taking an inventory of the various sources of income that are coming into your household, right? So cash in. Next, we're going to need to look at our spending, right? So the cash is coming in, we know where that's coming from, the various sources, but then where is it actually going? Okay, what kind of subscriptions are you paying for? How much is your mortgage? How much on average are you spending on food? One of the things that I've seen a lot over the past year or two with the high inflation that we've been experiencing is that a lot of households are kind of in a pinch right now because, the cost of groceries, gas, even various insurances, and especially too, if you bought a home, the rates are higher, mortgage costs are higher, rent's higher. So it's very important that we start to understand where this money is going and what that means. And then really looking, once we have an understanding of what's going out, we understand what's coming in, what's going out, then we need to start understanding the various categories that are associated with those expenses. So really understanding the expenses that our households facing and start to prioritize, what's necessary, what's important, what, might be able to go, and we might be able to cut it out. So we need to start categorizing our expenses by understanding them. Then, of course, keeping within your budget, there's a lot of ways to do this once we have a budget established, as we'll go into. And then, of course, preparing for the unexpected. So as I said, having an emergency fund, but also too, having built-in flexibility to the budget that you're sticking to, okay? So first of all, let me get some hydration here. We need to assess our income, okay? So really have an understanding and make a concerted effort to understand what is our income situation look like. So cash flow is king, right? That's the whole purpose of this webinar. Understanding what's coming in and where it's coming from. And you should really understand it on a couple different levels here. Understand on average what's coming in on an annual basis, then boiling that down to, okay, well, what am I working with on a month to month? And then a lot of people, especially if you get paid weekly, I think it's very important to understand what the weekly cash flow looks like. Even if you get paid bi-weekly or monthly, it's still important to understand what your weekly cash flow is. So really start to put some kind of effort to understanding on average, what does it look like, right? So a really easy way to understand what your average annual income is just by looking at your tax return, right? So you'll get a W-2, but also too, there's taxes applied to that. But typically a W-2, like the tax form, is a very good way because it's going to boil down what your wages were for the year. Now, understanding what your inflow is on a monthly and weekly basis, it's quite simple to discern that just based on looking at your bank history, right? You can filter on basically any bank provider that you're going to be using for, direct deposit. You can filter it and say, hey, bank, what came in this month? And most banks even have software built into their online portals that'll show you a breakdown of a month to month average annual income. So it's very important that you start to understand that what's coming in, because one thing that I see a lot of, unfortunately, and it's been a more regular occurrence since inflation has gone, is say somebody's making maybe $3,000 or $4,000 a month, but they also have this wonderful little plastic card that kind of lets them spend whatever they want. Is that a lot of people, surprisingly, they'll live very outside of their means. So say they're making $3,000, $4,000 a month, but they're spending 5 or 6. It's very easy to put yourself into a deficit, especially as change happens, as you start building up families, or you bought a new home and now there's a bunch of work to do. It's just important that conceptually you understand what's actually coming in. So on average, especially over the long term, that you're not spending more than you're bringing in, right? We really don't want to be running the red every month as a household, okay? So once we understand what's coming in, as I mentioned, we also need to understand what's going out. So it's about really tracking your spending, because at the end of the day, a budget, it's not about trying to limit spending. It's just understanding what you're spending money on. So having the conceptual understanding of, hey, here's what came in, hey, here's what went out, hey, here's what's left. So, I'll challenge each and every one of you every day for the next 30 days or the next month, just track everything that you spend money on, whether it's Starbucks in the morning, whether it's a smoothie at your gym, whether it's a shopping spree every weekend. Really start to line item, where is my money going, and have a conceptual understanding of it. Most credit cards, most bank companies, they will even break down and categorize for you what types of things you're spending money on. So whether it's housing, clothing, food, entertainment, most companies that you'll do financial services through, whether it's Capital One, Chase Bank, et cetera, I'm not trying to drop names, but most of them have built into your online client portal a way that it can show you and start to break these down, right? So once we started tracking our spending, we know what's coming in, we know in general where it's going, really start to understand the various types of expenses that your household is being faced with, okay? And there's really two main categories that you can put these things into. And those are as follows on the screen here: is there's fixed expenses and there's variable expenses, right? So as the name suggests, a fixed expense is something that's going to be the same or nearly the same on a month-to-month basis. It's very predictable and it's very easy for you to budget because it's not going to change, or at least within reason, or in the short term, it's not going to change. So like a mortgage payment or property taxes, rent that you're paying, various loans that you have, whether it's for a jet ski or a motorcycle or a car, or even student loans, they really don't change those too much. Same with utilities. I mean, I do see utilities for people fluctuate a little more. Of course, you pay more for air conditioning in the summer or heating in the winter. There's stuff like that. It's still a little variable, but for the most part, you got to pay your water bill, your electricity bill, and a heating bill every month. Maybe there's a little wiggle room, but for the most part, it's going to be there every month. Same with insurance, whether it's life insurance, homeowners insurance, car insurance, or an umbrella of those various types of insurances. Typically, those costs don't change. And when they do, it's somewhat of an increment, but you always know that those are going to be there, right? So once we understand what our fixed expenses are, it's important that we start to understand the variable expenses, right? And so just to be clear too, a lot of variable expenses and fixed expenses have a degree of overlap. So the first one's a perfect example, right? Groceries, you need to eat. On average, you're going to be spending a certain amount on groceries. However, it is somewhat variable. If maybe you have a birthday party and you buy a bunch of like fancy steaks for people, stuff like that. So sometimes it fluctuates. Same with maintenance costs on the car. Like, on average, you need to be paying a certain amount on gas, but every once in a while you're going to need tires, or your transmission blows and you need a big $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 repair. Some of those things are going to fluctuate, especially entertainment, when it comes to vacations, when it comes to going to movies, doing things, that fluctuates, but still on average, you should be able to get a long-term average of what your variable expenditures is. Same with clothing. Most people don't need a new wardrobe every month, but at the same time, we got to replace our dirty socks at some point. So it's really good for you to just start conceptually understanding. Remember, you have expenses, but they're going to fit in one of these two categories, and really start breaking that down so you have a good roadmap of, hey, here's what's coming in, here's what's going out. here's where it's going. Because once you have an understanding of what that looks like for your own situation on average, you can really start to feel like you're in control of your cash flow. And that's the whole purpose of budgeting, right? So once we started to categorize things versus our fixed and our variable expenses, we're able to break those things down a little more into these three separate categories, right? So living expenses, I kind of deem that as a roof over your head, food on the table, clothes on your back, right? It's these things that you need to basically sustain your home life, okay? Beyond that, we have wants. So I'm sure that you don't want to just sit in your house all day, every day, whether you're retired or you're working, and just, be content watching the same TV show and eating dinner every night. Like, we want to go do things, right? That's the whole purpose of why we trade so much of our time and our lives for money. There's things that we want to do, whether it's vacations, whether it's concerts, whether it's museums, whatever your interests are, those cost money. I mean, everything costs money, right? So once we start to really break the expenses down and understand these things, you'll be able to discern, hey, here's how much I'm spending just to sustain my home life. Here's how much I want to enjoy restaurants, concerts, vacations. And then, of course, looking at debt as its own independent category. So sometimes with debt, it does blend with living expenses because, like, hey, maybe we have a mortgage. Well, that kind of fits in both of these categories, and it's important to understand. But guess what? A mortgage doesn't last forever. Same with credit card debt, and student loans. There's a lot of strategies that are out there for debt reduction. I think maybe it's next month. We're actually doing a whole webinar on debt reduction. But it's important that you understand the various types of debts that you have out there, how long within reason they're going to be there, how much you're paying in interest over time, and then how much of your cash flow is actually going towards debts, right? So one of the rules of thumb that's out there from a budgeting standpoint is this 50-30-20 rule. Okay. So what they say is out of our gross cash flow, about 50% of that income should be flowing to maintaining our household. Okay. So like I was saying before, a roof over your head, food on the table, clothes on your back. That should be about 50% as a general guideline of where your cash is flowing. Above and beyond that, the 30 here is our want. So that's the going to concerts, going to restaurants, going on vacation, buying fancy clothes or just clothes in general. That's kind of going to fit into that middle category of the 30%. Then our 20% here should be dedicated to debts, whether it's paying off student loans, whether it's paying off credit cards, whether it's being more aggressive with our mortgage payment. So like I said, this isn't a formula that you have to use, but it's just a general guide that once you started breaking out your expenses, if you're kind of following these numbers, you're going to be in a good spot. Okay. So one thing that I didn't hit on is saving. We should be thinking about saving as almost a line item on our budget, right? So whether you're putting $300 a month into your 401k or a Roth IRA, you should kind of view that as a fixed expense, right? Because there's a delayed gratification side of things when it comes to planning for retirement or saving for big purchases. So whether it's saving for a house, saving for retirement, saving for college, we should think of those as line items on our budget. Just so not only are we living today, but we're also putting away for tomorrow. And there's a lot of different ways to, save and various places to do it. We've got webinars on that. But it's important that you review this on a monthly basis or even on a quarterly basis, thinking about which line items on the budget. Hey, can we increase this, whether it's saving or paying down a credit card debt or whatever. should we increase this? Should we decrease this? Is this fixed and there's absolutely no option for me to change it? We see that all the time when it comes to like life insurance and homeowners insurance. A lot of times there's ways that you could either have the same thing for cheaper or a better thing for a little more. So it's important that you really look at these line items and understand like, hey, I have this mortgage. What is this? What is the rate? What is my payment? Does it make sense for me to refinance this? Same with savings, as a line item. Like, hey, I'm putting $100 a month into my Roth IRA. Can I put an extra $100? Is that 100 really stressing my budget? And maybe I need to bump it down to 75 or 50. Really take an inventory once you have a budget established and just look at these items and say, okay, well, what can I adjust here to free up cash flow or just be more optimal when thinking towards the future, right? So we can make adjustments as, of course, life changes, right? Nobody lives a static life from the age of basically 18 until death, right? Every year, your income's going to fluctuate a little bit. Your priorities are going to change. Goals are going to change. So that's why it's important that you consistently are revisiting some kind of budget that you've laid out for you and your family and make any adjustments as necessary. So that's why it's very good to work with a financial planner, is because typically they already have the inventory of your goals and what's happening with your cash flow, and they can help you discern what kind of adjustments you might need to make based on the shifts in your situation. So maybe you got a new job, you got a raise, you had a kid, you bought a house, you like moved out of a house into an apartment. Life changes a lot and your budget's going to change with it. And then, of course, we need to be prepared for the unexpected. You need some kind of emergency fund. There's a lot of studies that are out there that say typically people in the US, about 80% of people don't have an emergency fund in excess of $1,000. So if some kind of unforeseen expense happens, I had a bunch of people had hail damage this past year in like the Milwaukee area, and it ended up costing them like $3,000 to $5,000 for a roof repair. Well, instead of having to put that on a credit card and all of a sudden you're paying 30% interest on the money that you borrowed and they're not hounding you to pay it off as soon as possible. Hey, if you had an emergency fund of maybe $10,000, $15,000 set aside, that doesn't disrupt your budget at all, right? And then once you spend it, you can just focus on kind of slowly rebuilding it. So there's some other ways that we can kind of categorize our spending and how we should start thinking about it once we've further broken down the various line items of our budget. And they kind of go as follows right here, right? So we have ourselves, right? The money that you spend on yourself, whether it's, a gym membership, food that you're buying, clothes that you're buying, stuff like that. Then we have our family, right? So paying for the kids to go to sports, clothes, food, alternative activities, vacations, stuff like that. Then we have community. So this might be money that you're spending to support nonprofits that you believe in, or, certain member organizations that you're passionate about, or, if your place of worship, whatever that is, those come with expenses as well. And then, of course, career. Most people from the time that they graduate high school or college to the time they retire, they're doing things to further their career and they cost money. Whether it's like a sales conference that you fly out to, or an MBA program that you're signing up for to kind of further your career, or some kind of designation. Every expense is going to in some way fit in these 4 categories. And we can start breaking it down further. So when unexpected events happen, we know where our priorities are, right? So typically I see, of course, people prioritizing their family almost usually as first and themselves as second, which isn't that bad because, you're a part of your family too, so you're sharing in the wealth. But we'll kind of dig into that a little bit more. right? So when we're prioritizing it into those four columns, these are some of the various things that, we can look at our expenses through this lens and say, okay, is this related to me and the hobbies that I have, the various technology that I need, whether it's computer, phone, laptop, iPad, etc., gym membership, like I said, family, recreation. So this is travel, extracurricular sports and activities, insurance that you need to keep, whether it's health insurance, life insurance, even to saving for college. So are you saving in like a 529 plan? Are you saving in a UTMA plan? Community. So charitable giving, social engagements, volunteering, kind of hit on it already. And then career, are we working for certifications? Do we need to buy fancy dress clothes? Do we need to go to some conference? So this is just a newer lens that once you start breaking down your expenses as line items, we can really work to kind of put them in these four categories. And by doing that, it helps to be able to give us more of a roadmap when unforeseen expenses happen. Okay, so let's kind of use an example of saying, hey, I'm living on a month to month budget. That doesn't mean that I'm not saving for retirement. You're still taking care of yourself for the future, right? But you have an unforeseen cost of $500. So maybe let's just make it up. You need new tires on your car. I think it's usually more than 500, unfortunately, but let's just use that as an example. So once we've been able to kind of split our expenses up into these various categories and prioritize them, if we need an extra $500 in our budget for the month to pay for those tires and you don't want to put it on a credit card, what we can do is start looking to those various categories and saying, hey, here's where I would be able to trim $500 for myself, right? So then we look at these categories, right? And we say, okay, I'm going to take 200 from the myself category. So how do I do that this month? Well, if I'm looking at my hobbies, if I'm looking at technology, and I'm looking at fitness, how can I find $200 in that expense category? Well, maybe it's, hey, this month I'm not going to go to that wrestling competition that I really wanted to go to, or that photography class that I really wanted to go to. Those things would have cost me $200. I'll just chop them out. Or, hey, I was going to buy the new iPad this month, but instead, maybe I'll just put it off another month or two or three, and that'll save me. It's going to be more than $200, but that'll save me $200. Then we look and we say, okay, well, out of this, I need $500. How do I find it out of these four categories? I really don't want to reduce my family's lifestyle, but I still need a little money. So I'll try to find $50 here, and then we look and we say, okay, well, where can we trim down $50 from our family expenditures for this month? Hey, if you need new new tires for your car, maybe that means that this month we can't all go out to eat here for this month or whatever it is. I don't ever recommend cutting down on insurance because it's really hard to kind of go back and get more, but it's one thing. And then of course, we look, hey, $200 we can pull from our community bucket. Instead of, the charity can't be mad at you. It's not an obligation, but maybe you pay like a monthly due to a charity that you care about, whether it's like a nature center or a cancer research company, or even to like church. I don't recommend cutting your tithings, but if you have to, sometimes we have to. I think people will understand, right? Same with career. If we need to trim money to fit unforeseen expenses from our career, hey, maybe I don't buy that new tie this month. That's $50 right there. So once you have the expenses that you're going through on an average month to month, yeah. So there we go. All right, let's keep moving. So I think we're actually almost to the end here. This is a quicker one. So realistically, when we're reviewing this and when we're really going high level, I challenge each and every one of you for the next 30 days, record how much you spend and what you're spending it on. You can do it any way you want, whether it's on your phone, whether you carry a little notepad, just start to keep track of this because honestly, you'll be very surprised. Every time I make a client go through these exercises or I'm doing like workshops in person and have people really think about it, they always get very surprised and be like, oh my gosh, I spend $400 a month at Starbucks. Like I think I'm going to start making my own cup like coffee. I could buy an espresso machine in a couple months. So it's really good for you as an exercise to really see where is your money all going. Because it's very easy in our fast-paced world that we live in today to not keep track of anything, especially too now that all money's on plastic for the most part. Not a lot of people carry cash and spend the cash. More people are just putting everything on cards. A lot of stuff's automatic. I've even had people when they do this exercise identify hundreds of dollars in monthly expenses that they're paying for subscriptions that they no longer use. And it all really starts to add up where they'll have 3 separate platforms that they're used for streaming music, and they have an audiobook subscription that they don't use anymore, and they'll have a gym subscription where it's like, I haven't been there in 6 months. There's a lot of things that you're going to start to realize about the cash flow in your own situation that you probably wouldn't have done if you don't do the exercise. So I challenge each and every one of you. There's no prize if you do it. But if you could, it'd be very helpful. So really start to think about that rule of thumb that we were talking about is trying to plan what next month's expenses are going to look like using that 50, 30, 20 guideline that we had mentioned over here. So, 50% of your cash should go to a roof over your head, clothes on your back, food on the table. 30% should go to our more wants, so travel, going out to concerts, going out to eat, stuff like that. And then 20% can go towards reducing your debt. All right. Saving is kind of built in there. I view living as the saving part, but everybody's different. This is just to give you a general guideline. All right. So by managing your money, having a budget established and knowing within reason how much you're going to spend on these various categories that are out there, it'll really help you to avoid impulsive purchases. If you tell yourself, hey, I'm only going to spend $100 eating out this month, and you've already hit that number and there's still 2 weeks left in the year, either you can exercise the discipline and not spend it, or at least know that maybe you need to allocate more in your head towards that expense. A budget is not meant to be this restrictive thing that's keeping you from your money. A budget is meant to be a tool that allows you to be a more financially responsible steward of your money, right? And then identify the expenses that you don't need and can't do without. Like I said, if you do the challenge that I said, and you line item every expense that you spend money on for the next 30 days, you're probably going to find minimum 1 to 5 things where it's like, man, I spent $30 on this thing and I got no value from it this month and last month and the month before. Why am I paying for this? You're going to start to realize that there's a lot of things like that because, companies know how humans are wired in this fast-paced society that we live in. That's why so many services are set as these automatic renewal subscription services, because a lot of companies know, like, even if they don't use this, they're probably going to keep paying for it, at least for a period of time, right? So really take the time to comb through your expenses and understand what they are, because you will find ways that you can save an extra $100, $200, $300 a month by just canceling stuff that you really don't use or need anymore, right? And lastly, be flexible, be adaptable with this. As mentioned, and as I'm sure all of you know, life changes, right? Life changes a lot. And by having a budget in place, at least as a template, we're able to more easily ebb and flow with the changes that are going to be happening in your life that a lot of times we don't have control over. Okay. So that's the whole show for this month. It was a little shorter than some of our other ones, but it's an extremely, extremely important topic. You know, having a budget, I'll echo it again, is truly the fundamental backbone of all financial planning, financial goal setting. You need to understand what's coming in, where is it going, what's left, and what do I do with it. If you have any specific questions for me and my team, all of my contact info is right here. You know, I am more than happy to hop on a Zoom call with you, have a conversation. If you want, we can look at some projections based on what you're doing, you know, and tie that to your goals, whether it's, you know, making sure that you're on track for retirement, making sure that you're paying down debt effectively, making sure that you're able to be saving in the right direction for certain goals, whether it's buying a house, sending your kid to school, stuff like that. So I'm here, I'm available to anyone that registers for these webinars. There's absolutely no cost or obligation to do anything if you commit to a meeting. This is truthfully just a value add to you being a part of one of our preferred employers within the network. There's no pressure with it, you know. So here's my contact info. I will shoot everybody an email within the next day or two here. I'll include a budget organizer that I use with basically all of my clients. That's yours free to take. I'll send you some different pamphlets as well as like supplemental material that'll help to reinforce some of the topics that we went over today. But I sincerely want to thank all of you for, you know, being here on the webinar on this wonderful Wednesday morning. I really do appreciate the continued support with this series that we've been doing. I've honestly only gotten nothing but like positive feedback from people. So don't be a stranger. Reach out to me with any questions. And of course, enjoy the rest of your summer. Thank you so much, everybody. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.